When I walked in, this gentleman walked up to me, extended his hand with this big, beautiful smile that I recognized and said, "Hello, I'm Richard." And I was like, oh my God, in my head. I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't say a word. "Your name might be Richard, but it's also Ringo." Ringo Starr was the first person to welcome me to my very first AA meeting, and his lovely wife, Barbara Bach, was behind him. And it's, of course, they've been sober for decades now, so I'm not outing anybody's sobriety. So I sat there in my very first meeting thinking, if Ringo Starr can get sober, so can I. And the fact that Ringo Starr, in order to stay sober, he was showing up at AA meetings and greeting people.
Yeah, he was being
that
of
was
service.
just,
yeah,
that was amazing to me.
yeah.
Amazing.
Welcome to the Sober Curator podcast, where sobriety isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's the ultimate life hack. I'm Alysse Bryson, your fearless guide to a world where hangovers are canceled, fun is mandatory, and we still know how to shut down a dance floor, just with better shoes.
And I'm Tamara Routley, aka T-Bouge, your co-pilot, chaos coordinator, and the one who keeps Alysse from turning this podcast into a full-blown reality show. Buckle up, sober party people.
From lifestyle and travel to pop culture and zero-proof cocktails, we're serving up the stories, trends, and guests that prove sobriety isn't just about what you're missing. It's about finally remembering where you left your keys. Let's get the party started. Welcome back to another episode of The Sober Curator, where getting sober matters, but staying sober matters more. My name is Alysse Bryson, and I am your host. And today, I am so excited about our guest today. She is a writer, a yogi, a hiker, a licensed massage therapist who has lived a very vibrant life in sobriety since 1987. And her rap sheet of people that she's hung out with and things that she has done is fascinating because it involves film, television, multimedia, music, all in the LA scene. She was later a radio DJ in Aspen, which means she has seen a thing or two. She brings decades of creativity and resilience to her work. Wendy Correa has a new memoir coming out called My Pretty Baby, and I'm very excited to talk about the book. I really can't wait to talk about the cover because I have questions about her hairstyle on this very adorable photo. The book's coming out in November 2025 with She Writes Press. It takes readers into the truths of intergenerational trauma, which we all kind of have, family secrets, addiction, and healing. She's a sober wife, a mother, and she now resides in Denver, the Mile High City, which I love, where she enjoys traveling with her family and hiking Colorado's beautiful trails. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Oh, Alysse, thank you so much. What a beautiful intro. I want to carry that with me everywhere.
It's recorded, so you can just save it. We'll send you a little file and you can play it every morning to be like, I can be your hype girl to get you hyped up. I'm here for you, Wendy. Whatever we can do. Good. So I was really excited when your PR team reached out to me and I read through like your life experiences are fascinating. And there's just so many names that pop out that are like, ooh, I want to know about that. Ooh, I want to know about that. And I love talking to women in long-term sobriety. And you've been sober since 1987. So it is a wildly different sober space now in 2025 than it was back then. Even when I got sober in 2006, it is like night and day difference as far as the number of people recovering out loud, the different, the volume of different books and podcasts and everything. And so you've had a front row seat to kind of seeing all of this. You have this book coming out, my pretty baby. Like, I just can't wait to jump into all kinds of questions. I'll have a lot, but let's start. I do love to judge a book by the cover, Wendy. And so when I got the book, I was very excited. I get a lot of books, and I'm the girl who I have to actually read the whole book before I can write the review. Like, I can't just skim. Like, I got to read the book. But if a book has a cover that I like, it is more likely to end up on the top of my pile on my nightstand, and yours has. And obviously, this is you.
It is. I'm
And
about 4.
could you be cuter? Did you cut your own bangs? What is going on there?
Well, Alysse, that's a good theory. And I have to say, it's my theory as well. One doesn't know, but one does assume that what my goal was, I wanted to be the very first person to ever have a mullet.
Well, I think that you might be able to pull that off, like with Wikipedia, because that is, you are giving little girl mullet here in the most adorable way. But like, how cute is this picture? And what are you holding? Is it a little doll?
Okay, so what you have to know is this picture did not even come to me until about 10 years ago through the magic of social media. I found an old neighbor from when I was 4 years old, and she sent me that picture. And when I first got it, I looked at it. I was like, no, she must be mistaken. This must be someone else, because there were not a lot of photos of me until I went off to school. And I was not aware that I was such a towhead. So that made a lot of sense to me when I saw the picture. As you'll read in my book, and I don't want to right off the bat give a spoiler alert here, but I wonder if with that white blonde hair, if I wasn't sort of an elephant in the room, if you catch my gist. And on taking a magnifying glass and looking at that photo, it appears that that was a Ken doll.
Oh, okay. Yep. I can see that. I can see his head. That makes sense. Yep. It's about the right size. That makes sense.
And I do remember having a Ken doll. I did not ever have a Barbie. I didn't like Barbie. I had a Tammy. I had Tammy and Ken. So I don't know. Ken left.
Screw you, Barbie.
Barbie and was with Tammy.
You know, it's you. I also did not have a Barbie, but that is because my mom would not let me play with them. Because they couldn't stand on their own 2 feet. She didn't like how they were sexualized, all the typical reasons. So as I became an adult, I became obsessed with Barbies and started collecting Barbies. Not a big collection, a small collection. But I think it's because I'm trying to fill this Barbie hole in my soul from not being able to play with one as a child. Yeah,
absolutely. If it's withheld from you, then of course you want it.
Mm-hmm,
but yeah. And also when you read in my book, actually my father, before he passed away, there was like some kind of, put together yourself Barbie house. And that was actually when I got the Barbie doll house for Christmas. He was in the hospital. I didn't have a Barbie doll, but I thought that's fine. This house is perfect for Tammy and Ken.
Well, we make it work. We just, whatever life throws our way, we make it work. So exactly. How did you come? I want to hear about your memoir and your story without obviously giving the whole thing away, because we want people to read the book. But how did you come to pick this picture then for the cover? What does that signify for you?
The picture signifies for me that this sweet and innocent little girl had no idea what was coming down the pike.
Yeah.
And the title, My Pretty Baby, she is that pretty baby.
Yeah. Yeah. That's immediately what I connected with as well. It's that little girl, like if we think back to the little girls that we were, like, not seeing what was coming our way, the innocence of that is a pretty significant thing. I once did a hypnotherapy treatment, and I won't go into all the details of it. And it wasn't hypnotized in the like after school special movie way you might see, but I ended up visualizing myself the night before something significant happened to me when I was 16. And what came out of that exercise was recognizing that little girl that had no idea her innocence was about to be smashed to smithereens,
Exactly.
and having compassion for who she was.
Exactly. I've done hypnosis training, and I've also done a lot of inner child work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that picture for me does signify the end of my innocence, because when I was 7 is when my father died. So that was the first big trauma. So that is me, that inner child, that inner innocence.
Mm-hmm. And when did you start using drinking in a way that you would say is problematic?
Oh, I got drunk the first time when I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give you a little bit of the timeline, my father died when I was 7. So that was an amazing trauma. And no one talked to me about what that meant. No one said to me, we're very sorry that your dad died, but he was very sick. They did all they could for him. No one said, you needn't worry that just because your daddy died, your mom is very healthy and she won't die. No one ever said to me, he's very sorry that he won't get to see you grow up. Basically, they said nothing. I might as well have been the family dog. Like, they didn't explain anything to me. So there was that huge trauma that I didn't get to process: the sadness, the grief, the fear. And a few years later, my mother met her boyfriend, who became my stepfather, and he moved in with us, and he was a violent alcoholic. And so when I was 9 was the first violent attack, where he took our Christmas tree and threw it across the room and threatened to kill all of us. And there were numerous events like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so my parents had gone to a Christmas party, and all the adults were drinking this disgusting drink, Swedish drink called glug. And it was so, I could still smell it when I want to bring back those memories. And so I watched my stepdad drinking. Of course, that's when I started to hold my breath, to my fight or flight, to walk on eggshells, to sort of, as a child, be able to read the room, how many drinks before he's going to get violent.
Mm-hmm.
And, my stomach would churn whenever he would start drinking. But when I was 10 and had a sleepover with my girlfriends, and my parents were gone for the night, they all asked me, Wendy, have you ever snuck into your parents' alcohol? And I was like, no, of course not. And they all had. And they were like, oh, it's so easy. We just refill the bottle up to where we, drank it down, so they'll never know. And I wondered why my stepdad drank. And so I decided to find out, what is this drinking about? And I was 10 years old, and I got drunk and learned that it numbed you. And it was the first time since my dad died that I sort of felt relaxed and numb.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would say that was the first time. And then my teen years were all drinking and pot smoking and taking LSD.
Yeah, all the typical things. And back then, that generation, they didn't, it was very common to not talk about feelings or anything. I mean, even the household that I grew up in, I don't think I've ever seen my parents like fight. If they did, it was like in hush hush tones behind a closed door, because they just didn't want to deal with a lot of big topics. And so I can see why you felt like you did just get ignored or treated like the family dog, and not,
Yes,
told that, all your feelings were valid.
correct.
Okay, so you go through your teenage years, you're taking things out of your parents' closet. Obviously, it's not a great home life. Let's talk about how you land into the music industry in LA. Like, how do you get there?
So I left home at 17 and fled to California. I wound up getting myself into college in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, and then transferred to Humboldt State. And that is when I started my healing journey. I intuitively was drawn to Buddhism and meditation and nature and hiking. And I also loved theater. So I got 1 degree in psychology and 1 degree in theater. And I had never had anything as a kid. I'd never had, any kind of after school, dance or music or
Not when
anything.
you're
And so
hanging
I
out
was
with
like,
Tammy and Ken. You're just hanging out with
no,
Tammy and
no,
Ken.
that was about it. Tammy and Ken. Or what I got for free, which was the radio. And I listened to WLS, Chicago's radio station, and a lot of Motown. And I say music raised me. That was my respite. I would go into the music educated me. And so I always loved music. And after leaving Humboldt, I moved to Los Angeles to study acting and spent years studying acting. And then this pull was always to work in the music industry. So I was studying acting and I met a friend, an artist friend, and he was the first one that took me to meet Joni Mitchell. So I wasn't even in the music industry yet. And my friend Boyd Elder, he's passed now, but he was a famous artist who drew the beautiful skull album covers, like for the Eagles and other bands.
Wow.
He picked me up. I was working in a restaurant in Malibu called the Jetty. And, it was barbecue and I had a bowling shirt and jeans and high tops. And I had barbecue sauce all over my shirt. And Boyd shows up and says, I want to take you to meet a friend of mine. And I was always, it was like, yay, I love meeting Boyd's friends because being an artist for all of these musicians, he had lots of friends, but I had no idea where we were headed as we drove up the Pacific Coast Highway until we pulled into the Malibu colony. And then I was, Boyd, where are we? Who am I meeting? Do I still have any makeup on? Oh my God, I have barbecue sauce all over my shirt. And he's like, she doesn't care what you look like. And I'm like, who is she? Who is she, Boyd? As he's ringing the doorbell and here, Joni Mitchell opens the door. So through Boyd, I had a number of incredible times that I got to hang out with Joni Mitchell before I even got into the music industry. What prompted me to finally get into the music industry was in 1985, my 17-year-old niece, died of a heart condition. And it was obviously so traumatizing to lose a child that I was determined to live for her. And it was like Kelly can no longer live and life is to be lived. What is it that I really, really most want to do? And through a friend of a friend, they got me an interview with, it was Triad Artists, which is now a part of William Morris, their music booking. So they're the agents that book the musicians. And the first job that I got, the only job that they had, was in accounting. And I didn't know a thing about accounting, but I took it. And I worked in accounting until they moved me to assist a couple of agents. So I started with these agents and worked there for a while. And then I moved into publishing for A&M Records. So A&M Records was one of the last independent record companies in Los Angeles, owned by Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss. And I worked in the publishing division. And then from there, I had moved to Geffen Records, and essentially Guns N' Roses paid my rent for the time that I was at Geffen Records. And it was during that time when I was at A&M Records, I went to the very first ever South by Southwest music festival in Austin, Texas. And that for me is day one of my sobriety of now 38 years.
Your first day sober was at South by Southwest, the first one?
Yes.
That's wild. What a history. What a
Yes.
history.
But not before I had had a few slips
Sure.
and been arrested and gotten a DUI.
Which
You want me to
getting a
care about that?
getting a DUI back then was actually kind of hard to do. Not as I mean, I got pulled over several times and I was either told to like drive home carefully or they followed me home. Like it was different back then. So tell me, let's talk about your DUI. Like, how did that happen? I mean, besides the obvious.
Right. So, well, I was on the Sunset Strip. A friend of mine, so backing up, I had a friend who did costumes for the Phil Collins band and for Peter Gabriel, and she's British. She worked for years with all kinds of musicians, touring with them and taking care of their costumes. And so I was helping her with the costumes for the Phil Collins band. They were playing in Los Angeles. And then later she came into town with the Thompson twins. And so I joined her at Sushi on Sunset, and we were partying with the roadies and all the people that worked for the Thompson twins. And we were, of course, eating sushi, and we were drinking sake and beer. And she was staying on the Sunset Strip at Le Mondrian. And so do I wish I just said to her, Charlotte, can I just stay with you? Yes, of course. But instead, I decided to drive home from Hollywood to Venice Beach, where I lived, and got pulled over. And of course, this is all in my book, the whole story. But, I was dressed like, I was in the music industry, fishnet stockings and a short leather skirt and a little rabbit fur jacket. And I was hoping that they thought I looked like Tina Turner rock and roll and not like a hooker. So I could not for the life of me, they would say, ma'am, can you walk a straight line from here to the other officer? Could not do it. Ma'am, can you touch your nose? Could not do it. Next thing I know, Miranda rights, ma'am, you have the right to remain silent and yada, yada, yada. And the next thing I know, please put your hands behind your back, click, click, and into the cruiser I went. So I was given court-ordered AA meetings, and my license was taken away from me. I could only drive from home to work, to the grocery store, to AA meetings. And being in the music industry, I found a list of music industry AA meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first meeting that I got my courage up to go to was in West LA. I stood outside just hyperventilating before I walked in. And when I walked in, this gentleman walked up to me, extended his hand with this big, beautiful smile that I recognized and said, "Hello, I'm Richard." And I was like, oh my God, in my head. I didn't say it out loud. I couldn't say a word. Your name might be Richard, but it's also Ringo. Ringo Starr was the first person to welcome me to my very first AA meeting. And his lovely wife, Barbara Bach, was behind him. And it's, of course, they've been sober for decades now. So I'm not outing anybody's sobriety. So I sat there in my very first meeting thinking, if Ringo Starr can get sober, so can I. If Ringo Starr, who's, around drugs and alcohol all the time and has all of this pressure of being one of the most famous musicians on the planet, so can I. And that was really important for me. And the fact that Ringo Starr, in order to stay sober, he was showing up at AA meetings and greeting people.
Yeah, he was being
That
of
was
service.
just,
yeah.
that was amazing to me.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. That's so incredible to hear that story. I mean, most people's first time at AA is not like that, Wendy. That is not, that is, for all of our listeners, I want you to know that is not the normal. I still encourage you to go and check out a meeting if you've never been,
please
but
go.
you were unlikely to be greeted by anyone comparable to Ringo Starr. So very unlikely,
exactly.
but makes for an amazing story for sure.
Very amazing. Yes. I mean, I was in LA. I was in the music industry. So it was incredibly different. I mean, David Crosby was in numerous meetings that I was in, many celebrities, of course, throughout the whole LA region. And it was amazing. What was good about that is that a lot of people were getting sober.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the music industry were getting sober. A lot of actors, people in the industry were getting sober because they knew they were going to die if they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were going to lose their jobs, or they were going to be, they would never work again. So I was surrounded by a lot of good people, creative people who wanted to get sober. And so I didn't feel so alone being in the music industry, being surrounded by all of them. Yes.
So then, how did you become a DJ in Aspen? And were you sober when you were a DJ in Aspen by that point?
Yes. So I spent a decade in the music industry working, as I said, at the different companies and finally at Geffen Records. And I, being in the music industry, there is definitely a glass ceiling, and there was a gigantic hashtag Me Too movement before there was ever a hashtag Me Too movement. It was a lot of fun, but it was not easy, and it wasn't easy as a woman to, become something beyond an assistant, or, it took a lot. And I decided that I wanted to get out of Los Angeles. By then, I was 37 years old and I had never been married. It was very difficult to have relationships in Los Angeles. And I had always wanted to be a DJ. I had studied acting. I had studied voice. I wanted to use my voice. I loved music. I thought that music was one of the highest forms of creativity that a human can perform. I still wanted to be in the music industry. I always loved Colorado since I was a young kid, and this is also in my book, that I always said that eventually I'm going to live in Colorado. And so I had a friend that I had met in Los Angeles. She was from Colorado, and she was my best friend, and she had moved back to Colorado. So I would go from LA to visit her. And she was a bit of a psychic, but I never let her tell me things because she knew me too well, and that's not fair, right? But she would do readings on people. I was like, no, Diana, I don't want to hear anything you've got to say. But one time when I called her for the umpteenth time, crying about my non-existent love life in Los Angeles, she just was so beside herself and said, has it ever occurred to you that your soulmate is not in Los Angeles and he never would be? And I was like, no, I always thought I'd meet him here, and then we would move to like Santa Fe or Colorado or Europe or whatever. And she's like, no. And when I asked her, well, okay, smarty pants, where do you think he is? She says, I know you're going to think I'm just saying this, but it's true. He's in Aspen. And so I literally said, I challenged God and said, if I'm supposed to move to Aspen, then I want to get a job as a DJ on the radio. And that week, I flew to Denver where my friend was living. And then I drove up to Aspen and I met with a woman who had a room for rent, and just to kind of get an idea. And I I didn't even know if there was a radio station in Aspen. I didn't know. And so I'm having lunch with this woman and all of her friends. It was the middle of the day, mind you. I'm used to working, in a radio company during the day. And all of these women were massage therapists in Aspen. And here they are in the middle of the day having lunch, and then they're going to go for a hike. So we're sitting there having lunch. And one of the women asked me, "Oh, so Wendy, you're going to move to Aspen. What are you going to do here?" And I said, "I'd like to be a DJ on the radio." And the woman said, "Oh, I think so-and-so is leaving. I think there's a job at KSPN." And I called the radio station, got the program manager on the phone, and I said, "I hear that Claudia is leaving her position as a DJ, and I'd love to talk to you about that job." And he paused, there was silence, and then he said, "Can you be here in an hour?" And I was like, "Yep." So I showed up. He looks at my resume, and it's all of this music industry experience. And he said, "Well, this is great, Wendy. You have all of this experience, but can you actually talk on the radio?" And so he put me downstairs in a booth, and, it looks like a spaceship to me with all these knobs and levers. And, back then there were still cassettes and CDs. And he gave me a CD of Ricky Lee Jones, who was one of our clients on Geffen Records. And he said, "Here's Ricky Lee Jones' latest album. Why don't you pretend that you're a DJ introducing the song? Take this cassette and record yourself, and I'll be back in 15 minutes." And he leaves, and I'm just like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into now? Well, I popped in the cassette and queued it up and said, "Wendy Moore here on KSPN FM, Roaring Fork Radio. We've got Ricky Lee Jones's latest release on Geffen Records. Give it a listen. KSPN FM, Roaring Fork Radio," or something like that. And I got the job.
That's wild. I mean, I don't believe in coincidences, Wendy. So how long had you been living in Aspen before you met your husband?
Well, so I went back to LA. I sold everything except for books and clothes, moved back to Aspen in the fall. And just backing up a second, the program manager said to me, "So Wendy, just want you to know you're going to get all kinds of crazy calls in the middle of the night," because my shift was, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. to start.
Brutal.
And yes, so 1987. So now I'm completely sober. I've also quit smoking. So I have a number of years of sobriety under my belt and no smoking at all. And so there were no substances, of course, to keep me awake for the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. And he said to me, "You're going to get some crazy calls, particularly from the gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson. Do you know who that is?" And at first I was like, I kind of remember him from articles I read in Rolling Stone magazine. And also, wasn't he in the Doonesbury cartoons? And he said, yes. So I really didn't know much about Hunter. I hadn't read his books, but sure enough, just about, a few weeks into my stint as a DJ on KSPN FM at 4 a.m, I get a call, and I say, "Wendy Moore here on KSPN. Good morning." And he's like, Good morning. Can you play me some Warren Zevon? Lawyers, Guns, and Money? Yes, Hunter, I can play you some Warren Zevon. And I continued to play Warren Zevon for Hunter for the rest of my tenure at KSPN. But also a few weeks after that, I was also, I had to work a million jobs to live in Aspen. I was also a waitress. He came into the restaurant where I was waitressing, and I introduced myself as not only his waitress, but his DJ. And by the end of his lunch, he asked me, if I would like to work for him. So I became Hunter S. Thompson's assistant, and I was working as a DJ. So I worked all winter, and then that following spring in April is when my husband called in to request a song, and that's how we met.
Oh, what a cute meet cute. Wow. Okay, had
Yes.
Hunter published Leaving Las Vegas yet?
Fear and Loathing in
Fear
Las
and Loathing.
Vegas.
Sorry, I had the wrong one.
Yes. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So one of the first tasks, he asked me, have you read my book, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? And I, was very embarrassed that I hadn't, but I said, no, I'm sorry, I haven't. And he said, oh, it doesn't matter. Read my book. They want to make a Hollywood movie. So, read my book and then read the script and tell me what you think. So someone else had written the script for his book, and I read his book and then I read the script, and they were very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the first task. And then eventually, of course, Johnny Depp was in the film Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's definitely a classic for sure.
Yes.
Well, I could just sit here and keep pumping you for questions all day long, but I won't. But as we start to wind down here, I would love to know, over all your decades of recovery, for our listeners, what kind of tips or lived experience that you can share that you can attribute to achieving long-term recovery? Because at the Sober Curator, that's really where we've put our flagpole in the ground is, we're really cheering people on that are looking to do this thing for the long haul. Doesn't mean they have to do it perfectly, but that's the North Star. So you've done that. So what could you share with our audience of how you've done that?
Well, as you'll read in my book, I wanted to heal myself of my family trauma. And so, as I said, I sought out Buddhism and meditation and nature and hiking. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I spent years in a Native American spiritual community and practiced Native American ceremonies. At the same time, I started going to AA, and I was sober for 5 years before I went to Nicotine Anonymous and quit smoking. I also did psychotherapy and writing, journaling, obviously surrounding myself with people who were loving and kind and mirrored back to me that I was a good person, that I was lovable. I had to heal a lot of family trauma before I could get sober. I had to understand that there a lot of the wounds the reason that I was drinking and using and smoking was to cover up a lot of the trauma that I had and a lot of the wounds that I had. So I had to get to a place of loving myself. I did many things. I did inner child work, and I did different spiritual practices. And then I really got into a lot of somatic healing. So moving, dancing, hiking, yoga, vocalizing, singing. It truly, in my case, took not just a village, but the entire world, I feel like. And I'm still doing that. I mean, this is a lifelong journey. I have come over, to this side of like, wow, that's been a trip. But as you'll read in my book, even as recent as 5 years ago, more of my family history and family secrets were revealed to me that were quite shocking and traumatic. And luckily, at the time I was writing my book, I had already started writing my book. I call it an autopsy of my family. I literally was trying to figure out what happened to my family. And while I was writing my book, this new revelation occurred. But luckily at the time, I was in therapy, And the therapist used a technique with me called EMDR,
Mm-hmm.
which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And essentially what it does is it just helps the brain to balance the trauma and to sort of take the zing out of it. Of course, you still have the memories, but you're not so easily triggered. And then she also used a technique called IMTT, image transformation therapy, in which you transform a lot of traumatic experiences and you're able to release them gently. So I am still doing it. I am still meditating. I'm still doing yoga. I'm still, you know, practicing self-care and self-love and surrounding myself with good people. And I will continue to do that for the rest of my life. But I wrote My Pretty Baby as, of course, for myself, to make sense of the world, to make sense of my family, but I want it to be a survival guide for someone else who may just be starting on this journey to find healing for themselves. And so I trace all of these things that I did to heal myself and all of the challenges and the mistakes like DUIs. Um, so that others might be able to feel less alone in their own journey and their own story, and that I might be able to help someone take whatever steps they need to get some healing and some sobriety.
I love that answer, Wendy. And I think it's so spot on. I am definitely in the camp that this thing, whatever word you want to use for it, I'm quite comfortable with alcoholism or addiction. Some people are not, but whatever you want to call it, I believe it to be progressive. And because of that, I think we have to be progressive with all of our recovery efforts. And that's what I heard you just explaining, is that you do all these things and, right? There's not
Yes.
some like self-help awareness level you reach and then you're just, I'm good now, I'm cured. Like that's not, that's just not how it works.
It's called life, and
Mhm.
life continues, and you have to continue to need helpers along the way. And it's going to be a lifelong journey to stay sober and to continue healing and to find my chosen family that I surround myself with. And, you know, there is no magic bullet. There's no magic potion that you can take to make it all better.
Yeah.
Just like that.
One thing
You have to work.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many things as you were sharing your story that I found similarities in my story. I wasn't in the music industry, but I was in the magazine lifestyle publishing industry, and which also has a lot of access to celebrities. And I have similar stories of just being in the right place at the right time and some fluke conversation happening and things going my way. And one thing that I want to ask you about is what it was like raising your son in recovery, because I have also raised my son in recovery. He was 9 when I got sober. So unfortunately, he does remember some, but a bulk of his life, 20 years of his life, I have been sober. So what was that like for you raising a son in recovery?
It was wonderful. I mean, my dream, I didn't have my son until I was nearly 40. So I had waited a long, not, didn't want to wait, but I didn't have my partner until I didn't get married until I was 38. So I had had a full life before I had my son. And so I really dedicated my life to him and raising him and making sure that he had all of the things that I did not have, which was a sane, loving home filled with art and music and education and books and literature and all of that. And so we had a lot of fun. And, of course, I don't think he was aware that I was sober until he was a teenager, when he started, wanting to explore himself and to try things himself. And so I would just talk to him about his choices And I began to share with him a bit of my story. And so he had an understanding that, you know, it's your choice, obviously, but you also can choose to not partake. And so because we had that conversation, we are very close and we can talk about these things. And so when he tried marijuana, for instance, he came back and told me, Mom, I didn't really like how it made me feel. And I was like, well, you're probably like your mom. I didn't like how it made me feel either. So good. I'm glad you don't want to smoke that because, and if you do smoke it, I hope you'll kind of wait until you're like 25 when your brain
Till your
is more
frontal
developed.
lobe is fully developed.
Exactly. We talked a lot about frontal lobe stuff because he is a boy and he did dumb things, so we would talk about that. We did talk very matter-of-factly, scientific terms, Mateo, the research shows this and this and that. And so, to this day, my son will have a glass of wine when we go out to dinner. Maybe not. He's quite a moderate, and I've never seen him or heard. He's 29 now. He, does not get drunk. He doesn't partake. He'll have a cocktail here and there, and that's perfectly fine with me.
My son is also 29, so we both had babies in 1996.
My God, we did.
How fun is that? Well, this has been so great. I can't wait to read your book now that I've gotten to meet you and ask some of these stories. It just sounds so juicy and interesting. And I think the big shining light here is the healing and the work that you continue to do and how important that is. At the Sober Curator, we kind of think anybody can get sober. You might need some help and some support and all of those things, but you can do it. But the staying sober day after day after day after day, that's really where the rubber hits the road. And I just love that, your story is grounded in action because that's what you have to be in order to hang on to this thing. Where can our listeners find you, Wendy?
They can find me at Wendy B as in boy, Correa.com, WendyBCorrea.com. And on Instagram, I am also Wendy B. Correa. And on Facebook, I'm just Wendy Correa.
All right. And I think for tradesies, Wendy, I'm going to send you a picture of me the same age. And I know for sure that I cut my own bangs. I
can't wait.
Well, it has been delightful to meet you. And I wish you the best success with your book. I can't wait to add the review to the Sober Curator Library Archives. And it's definitely going to get high points for me on the cover. I can tell you that right now. That's all the time we had. You can learn about Wendy in the show notes or check over on thesobercurator.com. Remember that getting sober matters, but staying sober matters more. Until next time. Thanks for tuning in because let's be real, we're way more fun than your ex's drunk texts.
If you laughed, learned, or just need more of our voices in your life, honestly, who wouldn't? Hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and send this episode to your sober or your I swear I'm only drinking on the weekends besties.
And if you have a story, feedback, or hey, maybe you just want to slide into our DMs like it's 2012, well, we're here for it. Find more curated magic at thesobercurator.com. And remember, getting sober matters, staying sober matters more. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep it sober.